September 24th, 2020. Hi, my name's Tom Yakopin, and welcome to the Tom Yakopin podcast. We're here today. We're going to be discussing some relevant things. I want to invite you to where if you like what you hear and you want to share it with others, you can visit us on YouTube or Facebook, the Tom Yakopin podcast. You can also find us by Googling Yakopinions, because that's what this is. This is just my opinion. So if you like it, share it. If you want to give me some encouraging words, that's always nice. If you don't like it, here's what I would recommend. Rather than getting angry and saying, I don't like that guy, and making it an issue to divide over, I invite you to email me or contact me on Facebook and say, hey, I take issue with some of these ideas, and here is why. And perhaps through discourse, we can move forward and come up with better ideas than, just us versus them and some of the odd division that we're seeing in the United States. But anyway, I want to start off by mentioning what I would say is a radical thought or statement, and that is this: that the Constitution, whether the United States Constitution or the state constitution, I want to go on record as saying that those written documents do not give we the people our rights. Okay? So I want you to just think about that for a minute, because that's the premise upon which we're going to build today. And I want to talk to you next about the importance of a premise in thinking. When you build a building, you start with a footer and then a foundation. Very important components, by the way, of any building. And that building lasting, that building standing the test of time, etc., etc. So your footer and your foundation, whether it is a building or whether it is the thinking process to come to a good conclusion, it is imperative that you have a good foundation. Upon a good foundation, right, is built the superstructure of information. And then as one combs through that superstructure of information, one can then come to a good conclusion. But if the foundation is tilted, if it is not square, if it's not flush, if it's not level, I'm telling you, the rest of the building is doomed. And so it is with thinking. So today I start with the premise, and that premise is the United States Constitution, nor the Pennsylvania Constitution and its Declaration of Rights, which I highly recommend you read, including the United States Constitution. But I contend that your rights and that my rights do not come from said Constitution. No. And that is the premise upon my discussion today. And by the way, I think that with everything that is going on in society today, at least as it relates individual rights, civil liberties, the opportunity to peacefully assemble, gather, run your business, not run your business, I think a lot of the argument, a lot of my problem, if you will, or my pushback, and which has been since March, questioning some of this, isn't a Donald Trump, Joe Biden issue. It is not a Republican versus a Democrat issue. I'm not a big statist, okay? But what I do believe is that our rights are natural rights, and we are endowed by them by our Creator. And I believe that the founding fathers and those men and women who together collectively enumerated in writing these rights, I believe they understood that and made it abundantly clear. And we're going to look at some of that today. It's abundantly clear in their writing. As we look at the United States Constitution, that Thomas Jefferson and then his influencer, which, you can find any of this online if you Google it, John Locke, who really drilled down deeply into the issue of natural rights, writing in the 1600s, 1690, etc. He heavily influenced Thomas Jefferson. And Jefferson believed that the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were bestowed upon, or that we, as the created, receive these inalienable rights, meaning they don't come from the state and they cannot be abridged by the state. And friends, this is a premise upon which our United States of America and our several independent states, this is a philosophy that we've embraced for a good long time. And I want to talk with you today about my concern over this matter in particular. And of course, I will bring up, and I'm going to mention the ruling by federal Judge Stickman, who ruled recently that Governor Tom Wolf's COVID-19 pandemic restrictions are unconstitutional, and why. But let's go back to this concept again, that the Constitution is not where we derive our rights. You see, the founders believed that every man and woman, everywhere, you are birthed into, you are born with these blessed natural rights. And that is the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or as John Locke originally wrote, life, liberty, and property. Jefferson and Congress changed it to the pursuit of happiness. But at any rate, the premise that they were thinking was this. They didn't put it in the Constitution because it made it so. They recognized, in fact, that this is how it was, that people who are created in the image and likeness of God are bestowed, they are given, they are granted certain rights, and they enumerated them. And then they took the time to put some of these in writing, okay, so that we, the people, would recognize the value of them, so that we would teach our children and our grandchildren what they are. And it was a mutual contract. The government's job was not granting the rights. The government's job was protecting the rights. And it was the people's job to walk inside of those rights. And of course, there were mutual agreements in terms of what law and order were. So government's role, as I understand it, and as many of the founders and hordes of writing established it, government's job was, again, they do not bestow the rights, but collectively we enumerated them, put them in writing in the form of a contract, a societal contract, and government is to protect them. Now, here's where I'm going with this today. What we have today is not that, as it relates some of these issues, in particular, the pandemic restrictions for COVID, whether it is how many people can assemble to go see their kids play football or soccer or basketball or whatever other school sport, or are we or aren't we allowed to gather in larger than 25 or 50% in a restaurant, or do we or don't we have to mask up when walking to the table, but when we sit down, we can all of these kinds of things. What I want to talk with you about today is, let's not look at, the moving parts and COVID, but let's look at the fundamentals. And the fundamentals are, if these rights do not, in fact, come from the state, but on the contrary, the state is to protect them, then what is a governor? Or what is a state that, in fact, begins to set that aside and say, for right now, this is on hold. What is happening is you must obey me, Governor in Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, or in California, somebody else, or in Washington, where my producer today just returned from, somebody else. Slightly different rules. So let's talk about some of this. And I'm going to quote to you some things. I am going to be doing some reading and some quoting, so bear with me, because I want to get you information to chew on, something to think about. And hopefully, this isn't too much information, and hopefully you're interested in enough to actually dig into it and think. Check me out. Make sure that I'm telling you the truth. Don't take any of this for granted. But I'm reading from Edwin Fuller, PhD, and he says, nearly all of us at one time or another refer to our constitutional right to free speech. While this is a common phrase, and while it may seem harmless, it points to a larger misunderstanding of where our rights come from, a misunderstanding that undermines many of our most fundamental policy debates. What was he referring to? He was referring to the fact that the Constitution doesn't grant anybody rights. The Constitution merely identifies, enumerates, puts in order in writing what those rights are that we, the people, have determined are ours. And by the way, something else I want to throw at you, and that is, this is a subtle perversion that I see, and I'm interested in feedback from you. But as I read the PA state constitution, our Declaration of Rights, as I read the United States Constitution, it's clear to me that our societal contract states that government derives all of its authority from the governed. So at what point, when we, the people, say, hey, we actually didn't agree to any of this, we agreed to what is in writing, and we put you in the office, you swore in an oath to uphold the Constitution. You swore, Mr. or Mrs. Political Leader, when you took your oath of office, you swore to defend and uphold the Constitution, to protect my rights as I understand them there. And what I believe is happening is that is being set aside under the guise of, we're now protecting you from the virus, even though we are taking many of these rights away from you right now. Now let's think about this. So I want to talk about some specific language in the United States Constitution, and I want you to think with me. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator. A couple of things. Number one, it's referring to us as the created, and it also does bring into the equation the Creator. It doesn't say that the Creator is Yahweh or Jesus or Muhammad or the Tao. It just says Creator. And that leaves a wonderful open-ended discussion, and it also is very inclusive as far as I see it. But it does bring somebody or something into the discussion that is bigger than you or I, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Unalienable. What does that mean? That means non-negotiable. There is no flip the switch, put on hold, unalienable rights. That's exactly what unalienable means. That nobody can take them from you, which is why they're in writing and why our political leaders swear to protect this. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, that's protection. That's put a wall around. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it's the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. So I want to submit to you this. My understanding was we were selecting, voting, sending men and women to office to defend and uphold these rights, not to change them, without the consent of the governed. Now, that being the case, I want to ask you a question. What do you see happening throughout the United States of America? And here in Pennsylvania in particular, what do you see happening in light of the federal judge Stickman's ruling pertaining Governor Tom Wolf's pandemic restrictions? Let's talk a little bit about that. If you're not familiar with the lawsuit, 4 counties in the state filed a lawsuit claiming the governor's orders closing non-life sustaining businesses and limiting outdoor gatherings and stay-at-home orders were unconstitutional. They stated that the orders were arbitrary, capricious, and interfered with the concept of ordered liberty as protected by the 14th Amendment. Plaintiffs included in this case hair salons, a drive-in theater, other businesses, as well as state reps and Congressman Mike Kelly. In his ruling, Judge Stickman says the governor's action likely had good intentions, and don't all governors and governments, I mean, don't get me started on that. I'm sure that Mao thought his intentions were noble. My guess is Stalin thought his were noble as well, Hitler, and on it goes. I mean, I don't think most governments sell their agenda by saying, hey, jump on board, we're doing the wrong thing, right? That's not the sales pitch that most people use. But in his ruling, the judge says he probably had good intentions to protect Pennsylvania from the virus, but that, quote, even in an emergency situation, the authority of government is not unfettered. And friends, this is the issue at hand right now. Today, the question is, do your neighbors, do we as a community, as a state, do we as a nation actually still believe in the United States Constitution? As Pennsylvanians, do we actually believe in the rights that are enumerated in the state constitution? Or without me knowing it, and perhaps without you knowing it, has there been a subtle regime change? I mean, for goodness sake, it couldn't be clearer when you look at Judge Stickman's ruling and how he came to the conclusions that he came to. I mean, we have hordes of writing, we have years of history behind us, and now all of a sudden, things are changing. What's worse than the obvious change, what's worse than the fact that government is putting on hold, setting aside your constitutional rights, again, which are not given to you by that document. They were given to you by God. They were outlined in that document. But what's freaking me out a little bit, what is worrying me, is how many people are actually okay with it. I want to ask you a question. Are you okay with it? Are you okay with sending our sons and daughters for the last 200 plus years to war, to defend said Constitution, to now all of a sudden say it is okay for people to step on it, to trample underfoot these very endowments given to us by God and enumerated in the Constitution? Let me go on with this. But in his ruling, Stickman said what? That again, in other words, there's no on-off switch. There's no, oh, this is a big emergency, therefore it is okay to shut off the God-given rights that Pennsylvanians enjoy, or citizens of the United States enjoy. U.S. District Judge William Stickman goes on to say that the congregate gathering limits imposed by defendants' mitigations orders violate the right of assembly enshrined in the First Amendment, that the stay-at-home and business closure components of defendants' orders violate the due process clause of the 14th Amendment, and that the business closure components of defendants' orders violate the equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment. I mean, friends, it's sad that we need an attorney and a judge to say these things. There was a day that the average young person, and yea, the average adult in the United States, understood these documents that we're discussing, which is another podcast. Remind me, Brad, to do this. I want to talk about the failure of education in the United States of America. How is it that we're sending kids to school, K through 12, and yea, even to college, and that with rare exception, young people have no freaking idea which way the parade's going as it relates to the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights, their states, and they just don't. And there are some exceptions. Hillsdale College is an excellent example, but few and far between. And I'm telling you, it's a travesty, and yea, it might even be on purpose. Because it has been said that they who do not know their rights have no rights at all. It's very easy for a shyster with a shell game type approach to move people, to move their attention this way, while the precious is stolen that way. Illusionists, magicians, and some religious, the phony religious preachers, and politicians. These are illusionists in many cases. And I believe there are some games being played right now where it's kind of look over here while we do this. And I'm telling you, I believe one of the fundamental issues at hand, far more important than what kind of mask am I wearing or should I or shouldn't I, is this issue. Right now, we have a federal judge in Pennsylvania saying what the governor's doing is unconstitutional. What more do I need? What more do you need to be very, very concerned with this? Seriously. So let's go on. So he also says, he's talking about the specifics, the business closure components, but in his written opinion, let me just summarize it by saying, and this is powerful, I've been putting it all over Facebook. In his written opinion, Stickman continued his explanation. He says, there is no question that this country has faced and will face emergencies of every sort. But the solution to a national crisis can never be permitted to supersede the commitment to individual liberty that stands as the foundation of the American experiment. Folks, do you get that? Okay? Something bad happens. We'll turn off the Constitution, suspend it all. That's not what we've been doing. And we've been through some things, okay? Yeah, Civil War, wars, Pearl Harbor. I mean, come on. So what I'm talking about is there is a major battle at hand, and I think it is for the foundation stones, the fundamental building blocks upon which the entire system of law and order, yea, our way of life here in America. I think there is a lot more at risk here than a cool mask or 5 at a table, or do I have to buy food with my alcohol? And I think that's all bullshit, by the way. But I'm more concerned with how they're getting away with it and the very fact that we are permitting this. I'm concerned that I have members in the community that are in essence saying, well, Tom, it's okay for right now. Let them suspend the Constitution because we're afraid. And I want to know, when did we begin acting that way as Americans? That doesn't, I can't see John Wayne behaving that way in a good old cowboy movie. I can't see Clint Eastwood be, you know what I mean? That hasn't been the American way. And I'm poking a little fun here. But let me go on with one of the most pivotal quotes. And I want you to get this. The Constitution cannot accept the concept of a new normal where the basic liberties of the people can be subordinated to open-ended emergency mitigation measures. Rather, the Constitution sets certain lines that may not be crossed, even in an emergency. Actions taken by defendants crossed those lines. It's the duty of the court to declare those actions unconstitutional. Friends, this is what I want to talk with you today about. I want to go back to, where are our liberties? Where are they derived? Do we get them from God, or does government give them to us? Therefore, government has the authority to take them away. My name's Tom Yakopin. This is the Tom Yakopin podcast. This is just to get your juices going. If you have some feedback for me, visit me on Facebook, Tom Yakopin Podcast, or Yakopinions. Love to hear from you. Again, if you don't agree, I'd love to know why. What's your idea? Where is Judge Stickman off? Were Thomas Jefferson or John Locke in their understanding of natural rights? And then how do we move forward, friends? By the way, if you like what you see, share it with a friend. I think now, like never before, we need as a people to speak our voice. We need to understand what our rights are. We need to share these ideas with others so they can make informed decisions, especially as it relates to the upcoming very important election. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.